There's just something about video games that seems to attract controversy. Whether it's about the fatalities in Mortal Kombat, demonic imagery in Doom, or prostitution in Grand Theft Auto, parents and politicians have been getting up in arms about gaming as long as gaming has been around. There are, of course, pretty reasonable concerns, like encouraging kids to spend time inside instead of exercising, and then there's the outright panic-mongering, like claims that video games are brainwashing us into a generation of psychopaths. But looking back, no video game controversy seems as wildly overblown as the reaction to the 1992 Sega CD game, Night Trap. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and click on the links in the description to vote on upcoming content. Like a lot of Sega CD games, Night Trap made use of the console's full motion video, or FMV capability, which incorporated pre-shot live-action film clips right into the game.
This is all very intriguing. I really don't know where to start.
Start by explaining the cameras and the traps.
That footage might look like low-quality crap to us right now, but at the time when every other video game still relied on 2D sprites for graphics, it was really amazing. That made Sega CD games stand out, which might be part of why Night Trap attracted so much attention at the time. It was an early high-profile, supposedly scary game to make use of those real-life visuals. Seeing real people in the context of the already hysterical debate over video game violence was definitely a striking visual to point out in an argument. Because the videos were pre-recorded though, it also meant that players couldn't really interact with the footage all that much. The console could stop or start the videos and switch between them, but there really wasn't much room for actual gameplay. As a result, most Sega CD games used FMV for their cutscenes and stuck to regular sprites for the rest of the stuff. But in Night Trap, the whole game was FMV. That meant that it was barely a game at all, really. More like an interactive DVD menu.
You're wasting time. Get over there now!
In terms of the game's story, you play as a member of the unbelievably named Sega Control Attack Team, which spells SCAT in case you missed it. Your job is to protect a group of 5 teenage girls on a sleepover from the evil blood-sucking monsters who try to creep up on them. To do that, players must switch between cameras positioned around a house to watch out for bad guys and creepily spy on the girls. Once in a while you could push a button at a strategic moment to trigger a trap and stop the bad guys, but that was basically it. It was night, there were traps, you know, Night Trap.
All right, you were perfect. Nobody's ever done that. I knew I could count on you.
Now, it's not exactly what you'd call a progressive premise for a game, even for the early 90s. It's definitely got some very creepy voyeuristic theming, and some wardrobe choices for the female cast probably would have been considered pretty revealing at the time. But if you've been watching the gameplay footage up until this point, you'll also notice that it's cheesy as The monsters are a goofy parody of something from like a 50s B-movie. The violence is almost completely sterilized except for the constant high-pitched screaming. There's never even any blood shown on camera. Compared to movies with similar subject matter like Halloween or Friday the 13th, which by the way came out way earlier, Night Trap was downright tame. For that matter, one of the most famously gory games of all time, Mortal Kombat, came out later the same year. But for some reason, Night Trap still drew a huge share of the controversy. And when we say huge, we really mean it. Night Trap was the subject of protests across North America and widespread news coverage. Opponents claimed that it endorsed voyeurism, violence against women, abduction, and even rape, of course. Evidently, despite the fact that the game actually played like a teen comedy parody of a slasher movie, it became a major talking point in the US Senate hearings on violence in video games.
Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse in my judgment.
In fact, those were the same hearings that led to the formation of the ESRB rating system, which now classifies what games are suitable for which audiences. What do you think the rating for Night Trap would have been? Anyway, make no mistake, we are by no means trying to argue that Night Trap is some kind of misunderstood cult classic. It's clunky, it's creepy, more than a bit sexist, and most importantly, really isn't fun, like at all. But it's, also goofy, it features some terrible acting, and for a horror game, it's ridiculously unfrightening. If Night Trap's very vocal opponents hadn't put so much time and effort into freaking out about it, the game probably would have been forgotten a really long time ago.
I don't think you understand, Mr. Martin, but you're in serious trouble.
How many other live-action FMV games can you name off the top of your head right now? Exactly. Instead, though, by blowing things way out of proportion, all those well-meaning anti-Night Trap activists managed to do was draw attention to it. Now, it'll go down in history, not just as a footnote, but as the bizarrely overblown focal point of a debate over violence it barely even showed. and that made it a cult classic. In fact, most recently the game was remastered for PlayStation 4, PC, and Nintendo Switch. The latter is really ironic, considering that during the Senate hearing, the then chairman of Nintendo of America, Howard Lincoln, said this.
And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
Overblown, misinformed, and actively counterproductive, that's the Night Trap controversy in a nutshell, and our pick for the dumbest controversy in gaming history.
Bye-bye, see you next time.
Thanks for watching Mojo Plays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.